Hi everybody and welcome back to Concept Machining. Now for some of you might know that a big part of machining is problem solving. You could be faced with a multitude of different puzzles on a daily basis, and so with that I thought I'd create my own puzzle. Now years of machining and problem solving for me have manifested into an interest in puzzles, and more specifically sequential discovery puzzles. For those of you unfamiliar with them, sequential discovery puzzles are puzzles that can come in varying forms that need to be solved in a specific order or sequence, hence the term sequential. They can range drastically in complexity from very simple 2 to 3 part puzzles to extremely complex and convoluted with hundreds of parts and lots of steps to solve them. Now over the past few months I decided to design and make my own, so I present to you my sequential puzzle. Before I show you how I made this, I'm going to solve it first. I'm going to do this for two reasons. Firstly, the footage of how this is made will probably reveal a few spoilers of how it works, and secondly, solving it will give you a good look at the parts so you will understand what I am making as the build process is shown. So let's get on with the solve. Most discovery puzzles come with a little bit of information, maybe a few tips and rules for solving, and this one's no different. Puzzle information. Objective: inspect the hourglass, it's not what it seems. Unlock the puzzle, remove all the brass bars and reveal something within. Designed and built by Concept Machining. Rules: no external tools needed, all tools are provided. Be gentle, parts and especially the glass can break. And trust me, this was an absolute pain to make this glass part, so I don't want it to break. No force is needed to solve this puzzle. Banging, spinning and shaking isn't necessary, and of course, tantrums not necessary, but understandable. Tips: keep the puzzle vertical to avoid parts hitting the glass. Certain parts only go in one place, so keep track of where things came from and go by putting them back into a corresponding part before moving on to the next step. I'm going to do this by keeping the parts in the covers you'll see later on anyway. Be careful with the brass hitting the glass, it could break. And I don't want it to. Okay, so let's inspect the puzzle. I've got these little holes here in what I'm calling post 1. You see it doesn't turn at all. That one turns. And this other one here, that one still turns here. Okay, I've also made this little spinning pad here. It's just got ball bearings in there with a little race made with a ball nose. Just helps spin around. It keeps the puzzle on top and just helps you manipulate the puzzle. There's also a screw here. It's holding this in, and there's another one 180 degrees to the side. Like I said, this one doesn't spin. That one doesn't spin, but this one does spin. Might be a clue, I'm not sure yet. Of course I made this puzzle so I know exactly, but I'm just playing dumb. Okay, so further inspection here, I've got two little holes here and a little, what looks like a brass pin. There's also another brass pin there and another brass pin there. Now, that came with the rules. You might have noticed it also came with a paper clip. Now, if you pay attention to the first rule, all tools are provided, and this is your first tool. So if you flip the puzzle over, you notice down here there's a hole there, another hole here, and another hole here. Almost perfect size for a paperclip. If you look, it's quite hard to see, but down in some of these, there's a brass spring-loaded plungers. It's kind of hard to see, to be fair. So when you push the paperclip into it, you might get a bit of spring back, a bit of resistance. So here you go. See, it says no tools needed. All tools are provided. So like I said, this is your first tool. So what you need to do is you need to bend the paperclip open and create yourself a little kind of poking tool. And you need to push it into one of these holes. And you see these little two dots here. What you do is you push it in this hole and you should hear a click. You hear that? And again. There you go, yeah. Now, with that pressed down, I should be able to twist this, which releases the first mechanism. Okay, now I'll lift the puzzle up and out of the way. Now this is what I'm going to call the base 1 cover. You see here those little brass pins are actually pins that go right through. There's also a machined little pattern on the back there as well. Okay, so first look at the bottom of base 1. As you can see here, we've got a few little features. We've got these rods here, like the first locking mechanism. And as you can see, when I push this paperclip through here, it pushes these spring-loaded rods out of the way here, which lets those brass pins travel through these little channels here and then straight out. And that's how that cover 1 got released. You see these little pins here? These little pins travel through these channels here, and these stainless steel rods keep them in place. Okay, so what else we've got? We've got some brass pad here with 3 holes in it. On this side we've got a brass cylinder with kind of an aluminium plunger inside. And then here we've got another brass bar with now our second tool, which is held in place with a couple magnets. Okay, nothing on that there. Okay. So you might think that these actually go in these screws over here, but they don't. It doesn't fit in there. You can see that's a square going to a square. So where else could this be used? Now we did see on the other side of the puzzle there, remember these screws from earlier? There's one there, and it looks like it fits about right there, and there's another one there. So you might think I have to screw these out, but you don't. You actually have to screw them in. See, it won't screw out, but if I screw them in, they go in. Screw that one in. There you go. Now I'll turn it 180 degrees. And I'll screw this one in. Hopefully now that should release cover 2. There you go. Basically those little brass screws locked inside these holes here, which kept that cover in place. And this is our first look at what I'm calling base 2. Okay, so you see here we've got another hole pattern on a brass rod here. This time we've got 4 holes instead of 3. We've got the same kind of cylinder with a plunger and a blank face here as well. And we're going back test to our third tool. Held in place again with a few magnets, the 2 little 2mm rods. Right, we're going to look around the puzzle, see what we can put them in. If you draw your attention down here, we've got 2 holes in what I'm calling post 1, which are just the perfect size for putting these in. Place one in there, place the second one in. At first glance you'd think this is a solid bar, but actually if you give it a little twist, this is actually 2 pieces machined together. We've got a threaded part here. They were turned together, which makes that threaded part of the seam invisible. So I'm just going to unscrew these, which breaks this into 2 parts. On further inspection here, we've got a little section here. You can see a few little lines there as well. I'll get the other section out. And here we have post 1. Right, so we'll further inspect this. So there's nothing in there. A hole there. There's a line there at the top. There's also, if you shake it, you can hear some noise in there. There's nothing down there. But if you look, if you untwist this, so you look, so there's another thread section here. There's also, on this little seam here, there's another threaded section here as well. Behind this is again another hole pattern, which we've seen before. There's a 4-hole pattern there, there's another 4-hole pattern, so I'm guessing later on in the puzzle that might mean something. So we'll put that back for now. Then we can untwist this section as well. Looking down here, don't see anything. Don't see anything there either, so there's nothing here for us. Put that back together again. Again, put things back where they belong so they don't get mixed up. And we'll inspect this side. I've got the same seam here, so I'm guessing there's also a bit of rattle here as well. There's nothing down there. We undo this side. can see a 3-hole pattern now, which again we've seen before on the other side. There's the other 3-hole pattern, so I'm guessing they have to match up eventually. Put that back for now. Right, now if you look under this section here, nothing there, but here, we can see a little flat-headed screw here. So we'll use that tool 1 again to undo this. Might reveal our next clue or next tool. And inside here was a little grub screw and our next tool. Now this tool here has got a hole through it, a little square section milled out, and then basically a flathead screwdriver on this side. So we're going to have to find what we need to use this for now. Again, certain parts can only go in certain places, so I'm going to keep track of things. So I'm going to put things back where they came from, so they get mixed up. Assemble them back together. I can also use the caps or the covers from the base 1 and base 2 to store parts in, which I will do in a bit. Right, so inspection of this tool here, we've got a flathead and a milled section in this one. Now, this section here looks very useful for this part here. And you see how it looks like it will fit in there nicely. When pushing on this, there's a bit of spring tension on here, and it rotates. It looks like it only goes in certain directions, up and down. So you just need to manipulate this until hopefully I can get it free. There's also a little spot on there as well, which might give me a clue to something. I'm just going to keep pushing it down, lifting it up and rotating it until I make a bit of progress with it. There you go. So this is a little spring-loaded plunger with a pin inside it. It lives inside there. I'll put that again in the cover that came from this side, so I know where the parts go back in. And then in the bottom here we've got a flathead screw, which looks perfect for that little flathead part on this tool here. I'm putting that in there. It's a bit, there you go. A bit too tough to turn, so what I'm going to use the tool 2 that we discovered. I'm going to put that in there. Give me a bit of more leverage. There you go. It's opened up now. I can take this screw out now. And take this little cylinder out. And there we go. So there's a little brass cylinder with the screw. That screw held it in place. Basically, it's a little maze. You can see that little aluminium plunger with the pin sticking out ran through that little channel there, and I had to solve that. As you can see here, I had to try and solve it and find its way through the maze to release it. I'm guessing I'll have to do the same on the other side, but it'll probably be a different maze. There you go, that's how that part works. Do the same on the other side now. And flip it over, do the same. So again, just use this tool to kind of manipulate the plunger, move it around, kind of feel for where it's going to move. Just make a bit of progress with it. Eventually it should come out. There you go. Let's remove this one. Same thing on this side. It's just an aluminium plunger with a spring and a pin in it, which then runs in that channel there, and again which hides this flathead screw here. Again, it's too tight to do by hand, so I'm going to use tool 2 to put it inside this little hole here to give myself a little bit of bit more leverage. There we go. I'll get this screw out, which should then enable me to release this bar completely. So there you go, that is post 2 removed. I'm using the paper clip to remove the cylinder. And again, yeah, it's another maze, but it is slightly different one this time. Same thing again, been held in with a screw. There you go, and there's the maze to solve. Okay, that's that part done. Okay, so this is post 2. And if you can pay attention to the ends, that's the M3 tap-holes that are holding it in place. And in the center there you can just about see a little line, just about. Again, it's another threaded section, which might reveal more tools or more clues. Which again, here we go. We've got 2 flathead grub screws, and inside you can hear shaking there. There's obviously something inside both of these. So I'll use tool 1 again to open up these grub screws and see what's inside. So inside here, there's a little grub screw. So inside this one is a bunch of pins. Okay. So I've got about 8 pins there, I believe. I'll put these back again, like I said, sticking to the rules. Stops things getting mixed up. And I'll look in this side now. And again, more pins, but less this time, only 4. So there's 12 pins in total. 8 there and 4 here. Again, putting parts back where they belong. I'll put them to the side for a minute. Okay, going back to post 1, we noticed that they had a 3-hole and a 4-hole bolt pattern milled into the ends. It looks like these pins will fit in nicely inside these. As you see, this one goes in nicely on both sides as well. So that must be a good pin. So I'll keep that to the side for a second. And we'll look for another pin. And this one doesn't go in at all. So obviously some of these pins work and some of these don't. I mean, ultimately we're going to see it goes in one side, but the other side didn't go in, so that's a bad pin. I'm guessing we only need 4 pins for this solve, so 8 of these pins are going to be useless and 4 are going to be good. So that one's a good one because it went in both sides. And again, check this one. This one doesn't go in, but it does go in that side, so that's not good because we need it to go in both sides, as you'll see in a minute. So I'm going to work my way through these pins and isolate the 4 that are good and discard the 8 that are bad. An eternity later. Okay, so now I have the pins separated. I've got the 8 decoy pins on the right and the 4 good pins on the left here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these. I'll do the 4-hole one first of all. So I'll get these 4 pins that I found and I'll put them in the corresponding holes. And then I'll use this section here to line up the holes. They drop in nicely there. Now, if I try and undo it anti-clockwise, you can see it's not going anywhere. So you probably guess this is a left-hand thread. So as you see, I'm tying it in clockwise, but it's actually releasing. So I've made this a left-hand thread. There you go, it's coming out nicely. I think this will be our next tool as well. So we'll save that. So on here is a left-hand thread, which might be important later on. I'm going to remove these pins and solve the other side. So that's our next tool, which you probably use with this section here, which I'll call it a threaded grid. I'm going to turn the puzzle over now. I'll do the same again, remove this cap, and get a 3-hole side this time. Remove it from post 1, put the pins in, and lock this in again. And like before, if I turn it clockwise, you undo instead of tighten up, as it's a left-hand thread. So there you go, I'm removing the next tool, throwing the pins everywhere. And there we go, that's the next tool. So, I can remove post 3 now. And this is just a solid bar, there's no secrets or tricks here. So now with that all free, I can remove the base 2. And this is our last part of the solve. So, with these 2 bits here, remember these are both left-hand threads. These will be used on this gridded section here to solve. And in this grid section here is a mixture of right-hand threads and left-hand threads. So I've got to try and find the 2 left-hand threads out of these 9. Okay, so I tried that one. And that one doesn't want to go in. I'll try this one here. Remember it's left-hand thread. Ah, there you go, that one screws in. I'll screw that in till it seats down. And now I've got to try and find the other left-hand thread. So I'll try this one. It's not going in. So let's try this one here. And there you go, yep. Brilliant. Right, so we found the both left-hand threads on these. The last thing to do now is to undo this section here and reveal the secret within. And as you can see, the brass posts were going through these 3 holes, which were helping lock this centre part in place. So you absolutely have to solve the 3 posts before you can even start to undo this section here. What's the prize at the end of the road? This shiny thing. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this some mystical time traveling device or some lost ancient artifact? Well, take a few guesses before I tell you. Now, I can't take credit for making this. I bought this as I don't have access to any kind of etching or laser engraving. It would have been nice to be able to make this myself, but maybe something for the future. Now, can you guess what it is? That's right, the most useless invention in the world, the fidget spinner. So yeah, that's the prize. I thought it'd be a bit of a joke, you know, going through all that to get something that silly. So yeah, this is the puzzle in all its pieces, in all its glory. I think it's about 60 odd pieces in the end, and quite a few steps to solve. It was a lot of fun making it, and I'll put it back together like this. And yeah, that's the puzzle in its entirety. We'll begin the build process now, and I'll narrate as I go. But I think it was beneficial for you to see the parts before the building process, so you can see what I'm doing as I'm doing it. And anyway, let's get on with the build process. Okay, so the first part I'm going to start with is the glass. What I need to do with this, I bought this online on Amazon, but I need to remove this section here because I want it to be open-ended on both ends. I'm going to use tape on this to stop it from getting scratched as I'm cutting it. I'm just going to measure here to try and get them as even as I can. So I'm getting about 50 millimeters each side. So I'll roughly know where to cut it. Okay, so I'm going to start by wrapping it in tape now. This is when I've got it on the mill. I don't want to scratch any of the glass because it would be an absolute nightmare to try and fix. So I'm just going to wrap it as much as I can. I'm not going to wrap the bottom, so I've got a nice flat surface to have 2 parallel edges to work to. That way it should cut nice and even and straight. Okay, so what I'm going to use these little diamond coated wheels. I'll put them in a little mandrel or arbor and put that inside the mill. I'm basically just going to run it along this edge here until this top section just pops off. So here we go. I've also filled this full of water as well, so that it kind of takes some heat away from it as well. I'm just going to run it along it until, there you go, there's the first section come off. Again, just going to run it along until the next section comes off. It's almost done. There you go, right. There's probably much easier and better ways of doing this, but this is the way I found to do it. Okay, so originally I was going to drill down here to open up the hole a bit so sand would travel down quicker. As you can see, that didn't work very well. This was going to trigger the locking mechanism, but in the end I decided to change my design because it didn't work, as you'll see later on in the video. So now this edge is straightened up. I want to check that the top and bottom edges are parallel with each other. So this is a Neotech digital protractor, and what I'm going to do is I just want to put it on top of a parallel and just make sure that the top and bottom are nice and parallel with each other. You see here I'm within 0.1 of a degree. I'm just going to turn it 90 degrees, make sure it's any different. And yeah, about 0.3, it's got about a 0.2 degree error, which is okay. This is just so that when it's inside the hourglass, the 2 bases will sit nice and parallel with each other. Yeah, see 0.1, there you go, 0 degree error, that's fine. Now I'll just move on to using some wet and dry sandpaper to make the edge nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm going to move on to making base 1. This little billet here was actually a bit of material I managed to save by using a technique called trepanning. And it's where you use a grooving tool to go through a workpiece and it will basically carve out this little slug here. You can do it obviously with varying diameters. You can't go too thick obviously. And yeah, it's a good little technique to save some material. Here I am just forming a spigot in base 1 that the glass part will locate on. Now I admit I didn't have much written down for this project and kind of designing it on the fly, which led me to run into this problem. My original design was to have the lock mechanism activated by sand inside the glass, but surprise surprise, sand and tight tolerance parts don't work well together. This taper here was going to act as a funnel to guide the sand onto the locking mechanism, but again it just didn't work, so this is me removing this, and I'm just showing this to illustrate how designs change as they go. So as you see before in the solve, I decided to go with a paperclip method to activate the locking mechanism instead, which I think is a better design in a way. It would have been nice to have the sand activate the lock, but it just didn't work out in the end. Okay, so now I'm happy with that. I'm going to flip it over and start turning the other side. As you can see, this fits on nicely. There'll be an O-ring groove at the bottom of this eventually, which I'll do later on. So I'm going to flip it over and finish off the other side. Okay, so now that the board's finished, I'm going to move on to put the O-ring groove in. This O-ring groove is just so the glass part can sit on something nice and soft instead of butting up against the aluminium and potentially cracking. And basically just get rid of this taper and create a little counter bore to receive the brass pad that it will sit on to cover this hole up. Now I'm moving on to making the locking cup that will hold the 3-bar locking mechanism into place. The brass carrier will sit inside this cup with a spring underneath it, which will help move the pins up and down when activated with the paper clip. Okay, so the next step is to drill a 3-hole bowl pattern. This will help secure this cup to the base 1. So I'm going to set up the radius. So in my case it's going to be 20mm. Its starting angle is 90 degrees and then angle 90 degrees, just so I start and stop in the same place. And I need 3 holes. And that's it. I'm going to drill these holes. This is the first hole that I'll wind to. This is the 3rd hole, and this is my 2nd hole. Okay, so I'm going to wind it into position. And begin. Okay, so now I'm just setting up to drill the 3 corresponding holes on the same bolt pattern that will help lock this cup into place. Okay, with this secured into place, I'm going to use this as a reference so I know where to mill the pockets for the silver steel bars that are part of the locking mechanism. I'm just giving them an occasional test fit to make sure I get the depth right so they don't foul on anything as well. As you saw previously, I have this set up on my rotary table so I can precisely rotate it to 120 degrees each time. Okay, with that finished, I'm now going to mill some slots for the silver steel bars to go through that will then screw into a little spring-loaded carrier plug that will help move the mechanism up and down. Okay, now I'm going to use a 4mm bar to line up a slot so I can get it nice and straight, and I'm now going to mill the slots for the brass pins to fall into that will complete the locking mechanism. Okay, the next step is I'm going to drill the holes for the paperclip to go into. I'm also going to drill and tap these and have little spring-loaded brass plungers to go inside them as a little decoy, so that when you press on it with the paperclip, it might feel like it's doing something, but actually it's doing nothing. Okay, so this part here, this is a bit of a design change. Like I said before, I was going to have a sand activated carrier for the locking mechanism, but in the end that didn't work. So here I'm just drilling a couple of holes that will lock the brass cover plate, which will cover this hole. Here I'm just adding some relief holes because I found that when I had the carrier mechanism in there, it kept binding up. I think that was due to a bit of suction. It was machined to a very close tolerance, and I think it was creating a bit of an air vacuum in there, so I'm just putting these reliefs in here to let some air in there. It kind of made the mechanism move a bit freer. Right now I'm going to start machining the brass covers that are going to go in base 1 and base 2. Okay, with that done, we're going to move on to the 3 pins that are going to be part of the locking mechanism. These are 4mm silver steel with the M4 thread on the end. Okay, this is the brass part that's going to hold these pins, and it's going to form the carrier for the locking mechanism. This will sit inside this little cup here. As you see, it's quite a tight fit, so it doesn't wobble around and create too much backlash in the locking mechanism. As you can see, this is where those silver steel bars will screw into that form part of the locking mechanism. And here I'm just machining the counter bore for the spring to sit into. This will create the spring back for the lock mechanism so it returns to its natural position. And this part is done. These screws here will help set the depth or the amount of travel that the locking mechanism will have. With those done, I can set them later on. I've also cut them to length now as well. So here I'm just drilling the holes for those to sit into. They're just M3 holes. And here they're in place now. And that sets the depth for how far those go down. Right, so now I'm moving on to drilling the main holes where the post will go through. These 3 holes are almost identical, except for one difference is that the second post will have a 3.5mm through hole for the M3 countersink screw to seat into. You probably would have seen that at the start of the video when I solved the puzzle. And with that, this part's pretty much done. So I'm moving on to the base 1 cover now. This part will sit over that part that I just machined and will help hide all the features as well as carry a few other elements to help solve this puzzle. So I'm just turning this down from a big slug of aluminium. As well as putting a nice corner rad on it as well. So this is the first half of it done. It's just turned down with a basic rad on the end, and now I'm going to hollow out the other side. So I'm just going to drill into here so I can get my boring bar in there, and I'm just going to bore it out and leave about a 4mm wall thickness around the edge. Okay, so moving over to the mill, I'm going to drill the 3 1.8mm holes 120 degrees apart. These holes will serve as holding the brass pins that will locate into these slots here in base 1, which will form part of the locking mechanism, which will hold base 1 cover to base 1. This is base 1 cover almost complete. I just need to turn the pins now and then secure them into place with some Loctite. To finish these pins, I'm going to use this little thing here called a pin chuck. These are used for holding small drills in the tailstock of your lathe or mill, or you can use them to hold small workpieces like I'm about to do. So yeah, I'm just going to put the 1/4 inch shank here into a collet, which will go to my headstock, and then I'll just turn these pins to length. I'm just going to basically face these to length and make the ends nice and get rid of that little parting off knob that you get left behind. Okay, so that's the first pin done. Now the second. I did make 3 of these, but I didn't bother showing the third one. I'll now move on to setting these inside the base 1 cover with some Loctite. As you can see, there's a little shoulder on these pins. That's to set the depth right so they're all the same length inside the base cover. This is important so they don't foul on the wall of the base 1. And then I'm just going to clean off the excess. And then I'm going to move them over to the lathe here. And I'm just going to machine off these little nubs here, and so it's all nice and sat nice and flush with the outside. Right, so here I'm putting a little kind of a clue and a little marker to show you that these parts move together. As you can see there, these little dots line up. It's sort of a little clue to help you solve the puzzle. Right, with them done, I'm going to start machining these little brass pads, and they're going to go inside these little holes you'll see later on. They're going to be sprung loaded they're more of a decoy really, to make you think you're solving something but you're actually not. And these little grub screws here with these little 1.5mm holes going through them, to help retain these plugs into place. They'll also have springs behind them to to help you have like a spring load effect on them. Right, with that done, we're going to start making what I'm going to call tool 2. This is the second tool after the paperclip, which is basically a screwdriver that you're going to need to help open the grub screws in base 2. This will also be used to solve a few other grub screws in the posts, which you saw in the solve at the start of the video. So here's the finished tool. This will live inside post 1, just needs a little bit of cleanup and it's good to go. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to base 2. And again, as before, this is a bit of japanned material that I saved from a previous job. I'm just machining it down to match the dimensions of the other base 1, so they match up when they're together. Here I'm just machining the spigot for the hourglass to sit on, as you can see here. And here I'm just going to put the O-ring groove in as well. This is so it sits on something soft, so the glass doesn't experience any kind of knocks or stress, so it doesn't crack. I've just flipped the part over now. I'm just machining it down. This is where I'm going to start forming a cavity for the prize of the puzzle to sit in. I've got to be careful not to go through the part. I'm going to a certain depth here. And again, just boring it out to size. I think I've got an M64 by 2 thread going inside here, so this is bored out to the minor diameter of a 64 by 2. Before I do that, I'm going to machine a 30-degree taper in the base of this pocket. The prize has a 30-degree taper on both sides, so I'm going to match this taper on both sides of the pocket so it sits nicely inside the cavity. This will enable me to make the cavity less deep, so I'll have more room for other features inside this base. Okay, so here I'm using a single point threaded tool to machine the M64 by 2 thread. I'm also going to M6 tap this centre of this so I can screw in the brass cover that I'm going to make here now. Okay, with that part finished and polished, I'm just going to make sure that secures into place nicely into base 2. Okay, so now I'm going to machine the M5 retaining grub screw holes that will keep the base 2 cover into place. So this is base 2 almost complete, it just needs the 3 holes put in now that the brass posts will locate into. So now I've moved on to making the base 2 cover. This is virtually identical to the base 1 cover, except this will have 2 180-degree apart M5 clearance holes for the grub screws instead of 3 small holes for some brass pins. And with the turning done, I'm going to give it a final push, then move it over to the mill to machine those 2 M5 clearance holes for the grub screws to sit into. I'll now move on to making the brass grub screws that are going to hold base 2 cover to base 2. And to finish, I'm going to mill the 1mm slots for the screwdriver tool to go into. With all that done, I'm going to make the corresponding M64 by 2 cover that's going to use to hide the prize and also help retain the 3 brass posts into place. So here I'm just turning it down, and I'm going to start doing the M64x2 thread, again by single point threading. Before I do the last few passes, I'm going to use base 2 as a gauge, and I'm just going to do those last couple cuts to get a nice fit between the two. With all that done, I'm just going to move on to machining that 30-degree taper in this side, so that when it's seated in the cavity, the prize will sit nice and tightly between the two tapers. Last final polish there, I'm going to part it off, flip it over and face it to length. Okay, I'm moving over to the mill now, and here I'm going to machine a grid of 9 holes with mostly M6 threaded holes, which are right-handed threads, but there's going to be 2 left-handed M6 threads in here, which you can see I haven't put the cutting oil in yet. And here I'm just putting the 2 left-handed threads in, which is crucial for the solve at the end. I purposely left this part a little bit thick so I could screw them both together and then machine them to get a nice flush finish on the top. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to machining the 3 holes that the brass post will sit into. I chose to do these 3 holes first so I could screw this part into base 2 and then line them up in the mill so that I could copy them into base 2 so they'd all line up perfectly. I thought about screwing this part into base 2 and then machining them together, but I thought if I did that I'd end up locking these 2 parts together and I'd never get them released, so that's why I did this part first and then I'll move on to base 2, which I'm doing now. So just like base 1, these 3 holes are virtually identical except for one of them will have a 3mm through hole for the M3 countersink screw, and the rest will have 10mm through holes for the brass post to go through. As you can see here, I've got some sharp parts sticking out from the thread that got exposed after drilling these holes, so I'm just going round with an end mill and tidying these up, as getting injured wasn't really a part of the puzzle. So with all the sharp parts removed, this is base 2's done. Okay, so moving on to making the O-rings now. So I just bought some 2mm O-ring material. Once these are cut to size, I'll just use some super glue and some accelerator to glue these together, and I'll do the same for the other base here. Once that's complete, I'm going to use one of the old glass parts to make sure it's actually seating down on the O-ring rather than on the aluminium base. I'll now move on to making what I'm calling post 1. I've started by making the removable M8 caps that will go on each end of post 1. These will have dual function. They will help keep the post secured into base 2 and also have a few features hidden inside them, which you'll see in a minute. Both caps are virtually identical, except they'll have slightly different features on the ends. Okay, so this is the first half of post 1. As you saw in the solve, this post is in 2 pieces. So I'm just going to put an M8 thread on this end, and then I'm going to turn it roughly down to size, leaving about 0.2 on there, so I can turn the other half with this half together to make that seam in the center invisible. And here I'm just parting it off. And then this end I'm going to do the female threaded side. This is where the first part I just made will screw into, making the full length of post 1. Okay, then I'll remove this from the collet, screw the first part in together and then turn them together. So this seam in the middle will virtually disappear, as you can see here. So the effect I'm going for is once these are machined together, that seam in the center will disappear, making it seem like it's one solid bar and then enabling me to hide tools inside the center. Okay, so here I'm just going to give it a final polish and then I'll part it off. Here's a demonstration of the effect I was going for. Once these two parts are screwed together, the seam disappears. And just end it up and make sure it's all the right size. And put the corresponding M8 female threads in here for those two M8 caps to go into. Like I said before, these M8 caps will help retain post 1 into place, as well as hiding a few other features that are needed to solve the puzzle. So now I'm drilling a cavity inside this post. This will help hide the tool used to solve post 2, which will be held in with a hidden grub screw. With this part complete, I can move on to making that grub screw, which will help keep that tool in place. And I'm just going to put it inside this little fixture I made here. I'll now move it over to the mill and machine a 1mm slot for that screwdriver tool to go into. As you see here, I didn't get quite a good flush fit, so what I need to do is machine the thread down to make it a flush fit, which I've done here now. That should sit nicely later on. With these now machined to size, I'm going to move on to put an M3 threaded hole in the centre and some 2.5mm holes in a 3-hole pattern, which will be used with some pins to solve post 3 later on in the puzzle. I'm going to do the same with the other end cap, but this will have a 4-hole pattern instead. Now I'm moving on to making the caps that will cover these 4 and 3-hole patterns. I'll put an M3 thread on here that will screw into that M3 thread in the centre of those previously made caps, which you can see here. And again, they're going to be one for each end. And really the purpose of these is just to hide these features on the cap, so you have to explore the puzzle in order to solve it. There you go, see if I turn them together they kind of disappear a little bit, and behind these caps will be these features here. And again, same for the other side. Machine these together will hide it. And that's the full assembly there. The only last step for this post 1 now is to put some through holes in both sides. I didn't want post 1 to be easy to undo, so you'd need another tool to undo it. This tool will be two 2mm pins that you'll have to find while solving the puzzle. Right, now with post 1 complete, I'm going to move on to post 2. With post 2 it's very similar to post 1, except for the ends will just have M3 threaded holes in. The centre will be split again, so it'll be in 2 pieces, and in each of the centres there'll be a little retaining grub screw which will hide a cavity, and inside that cavity will be pins used to solve post 3. Just like post 1, I'll leave about 0.2 of a millimetre on here, so that when I make the second part I can turn them together and make that centre seam disappear, which should hopefully make finding those pins in the centre harder to find. So here I'm just facing this first part to length, putting the M3 hole in the end, and then I'll start making the second piece. Pull it off now and then put the final M3 thread at the end. So So now I'm going to move on to making what I'm going to call the maze bushes. These are little caps that will go onto the end of post 2, will have a 2mm maze milled into the side of them. Machining wise, this is probably one of the most fun parts of the build for me. All I had to do was really just keep an eye on my X positions and use a dividing head to rotate the piece and just keep a note of the degrees that I moved each time. And then I'll just slowly increase the depth of cut until I went through into the bore. Once I was finished on the mill, I just moved it over to the lathe, gave it a final little polish, and then parted it off. This is the final product here. There's 2 of these for each end of the post, and I'll move on to making the second one now. I machined a different maze pattern to this side, so it created a bit more variety in the puzzle when solving it. Same as before, I'll move over to the lathe, give it a final polish, as once I part this off it'd be difficult to do, and then this part's done. And now I'm going to make the little grub screws that will help retain the pins used to solve post 3 in the centre of post 2. Again, just tidy these up, move them over to the mill, put the 1mm slot inside them. As you can see here, the screwdriver that I made as tool 2 will help undo these as well. So it's quite a multi-purpose tool, this one. Here's the cavity with the M5 thread in the bottom that the grub screw will go into. And this is the second grub screw that will go in the other half of post 2. And as before, just move this over to the mill, put the 1mm slot in there for the screwdriver, make sure it seats nicely, take it back over to the lathe and part it off. Nice. The last components to make for post 2 are these aluminium plungers, which will have pins inside them, which will have to be manipulated through the maze in order to remove them. These will be activated by a tool that I'll make in a second. And as you can see, there will be a quite tight fit inside the maze bushes. And I'm just going to part these off now, and I need to make a little hole here for the pin to sit in, and another hole that the spring will sit in, which is right there. And here I'm just going to machine some little pins down. These are little 2mm pins. I need 2 of these that will sit nicely inside here. I need them to go right through into that bore there, so that they'll also lock the spring into place once they're glued in with some Loctite. There's the second one made there. I'm now moving on to making the tool that will be used to manipulate these plungers. Here I'm just machining a slot that will be used to drive the plungers that are inside the maze bushes, which will enable you to remove them. On the other side, I'm going to move this over to the mill and machine a little flathead which will help drive these M3 countersink screws that you can see here, that will hold these bushes into place. I've also put a side hold in this tool so that you can put a bar in here to help undo the screws, as they will be fairly tight in there, to make sure that the maze bushes don't spin around. And here we go, I'm going to start assembling now. I've got some bond lock retainer here, and basically here's the little flathead that's going to drive this little screw here that will keep this bush into place on post 2. And here I'm going to assemble the plunger. So here's got a little spring, and this brass pin here will go right through and lock this spring into place. And that will create some tension, so when you're undoing the plunger, it will try and drive itself up naturally so you can pull it back out. I'm just going to use some bond lock to keep that in place. And as you can see here, that little brass pin will travel through this channel, and you have to work it free in order to solve it. Now I'm going to move on to making post 3. Here I'm putting an M6 left hand thread, which will be important later on. This is one solid bar, so I can turn this all in one piece. like before with the locking mechanism, I had to change my design on this. I'd already drilled the holes in base 1 and base 2 that were 10mm, and I didn't want this bar to go right through, so I had to machine these little collars here on the end. You see down by the live center, they're 12mm collars which will stay on the part to stop the bar from going right through the base. The final step for this post is to put the last M6 left-handed thread in one end. Because there was a collar on here, I can't put it back in the collet chuck, so I moved over to the 3-jaw chuck to put the last M6 left-hand thread in. With the main part of post 3 complete, I now need to move on to the corresponding left-handed thread caps that will help retain this post into place. With this one complete, I'm going to move on to the second one. You may notice here there's some little steps on the front just after the thread. This is so that when it sits inside base 1 and base 2, it doesn't lock up. I wanted this bar to be able to spin, which you saw at the start of the video. And you'll see here there's a slight little gap when these two parts are seated together. This is so that you couldn't just twist the bar and undo the thread by itself without using the tools to do it. I'm now just going to face these parts to length, and then I'll move to the mill and start machining the 3-hole and the 4-hole pattern inside them. These parts will obviously be used with the caps from post 1, which have the same matching 3 and 4-hole patterns. The last few parts to make now are the 12 pins that will go inside these holes. I'll make 4 pins that will actually fit inside these holes, and I made 8 that were decoy pins, so they were either oversized or half the pin was the correct size and the other half of the pin was oversized, so only 4 out of the 12 pins would actually work. And part of the puzzle was to figure out which of these 4 are correct and eliminate the 8 decoy pins. And here's one of those finished pins. Now I'm moving on to a bit of cosmetic decoration for the puzzle. I'm just going to machine some nice little hourglass kind of patterns into the base 1 and base 2 covers, and then I'll proceed to spray paint these so that the pattern is black compared to the nice polished aluminium outside surface. Here I am just masking it off with some tape, and I'm going to warm up with the heat gun because I've filmed this project in the middle of winter in England and it was very cold. So here's a bit of primer, here's a bit of black matte paint, and here I am just putting in the lathe and just polishing it off and making it look nice. Here's the final finish for the base 1 cover. The base 2 cover will look exactly the same, so I didn't bother showing that. So these are the little 2 pins that will be used to open up post 1. And one of these will also be used to be put inside the tool that opens the M3 countersink screws underneath the maze bushes. These magnets here will help retain tool 2 and also the little pins I just spoke about that will help undo post 1 and the maze bush screws. This is where I began making the turntable, which is what the puzzle will sit on when you're solving it. After completing the first step of removing the base 1 cover, you will notice that the little locking mechanism cup sits quite proud, so I've made this little counterbore here for it to sit in so it doesn't rock around on the stand when you're solving the puzzle. That's the first half complete, and I'm going to make a corresponding aluminium part exactly the same, except this one won't have a hole in the centre. And with these 2 parts done, I'm going to put them in the mill, and I'm going to use a 4mm ball nose end mill to mill a little race in here for the ball bearings to sit in. I've got some 4mm ball bearings left over from the flame liquor build that I did a while back, and these little ball bearings will sit in this groove and help the 2 parts rotate around each other, as you'll see in a second. So these are the 4mm ball bearings I had left over. And they'll sit in this little race here, and then that'll help it spin around. It makes solving the puzzle easier when you have it on this stand. So this is a little bit of a polishing demo. So basically what I did was go from 400 grit to about 2000 grit with wet and dry sandpaper, and then use this stuff called Peak, which is like a metal polish, just to get this nice final finish. And with that, that's every part made now. We'll move on to assembly, where I can explain a little bit more of how these parts work and how they interact with each other. So to begin with, like I said, this was my initial idea, was to have a plunger in there, and the sand was going to activate the plunger to undo the lock mechanism, but as you can probably guess, sand and tight tolerance parts don't work together very well. So I changed my tactic and had this little carrier plunger with the pins on it activate the lock. So here I've just put the spring in place, and it's going to sit inside this cup, and then I'm just going to push this into place so it sits in there nicely. And now I'm going to rotate this little brass thing around here so I can fit these 4mm pins in place. And previously in the build you saw I made those little screws that went on the top of this brass plunger. That's to set the height of this locking mechanism so it doesn't travel too far up. Here's the little brass cover that is going to seal this hole up. Again, this hole originally wouldn't have been there, but because I changed my design, it's there now, so I had to use this to cover it up. And these are some M4 capos to keep it in place. And there's one of these little plungers here, decoy plunger. You put that in there, and then when you get that paper clip, you can push on that and you feel like you might be doing something, but actually it doesn't do anything. It's just a little trick in the puzzle. And there's a little spring and a grub screw to hold that in place. There's two of these. So yeah, like you said, you put the little paper clip inside, then it feels like you're doing something because it's spring loaded, but actually it's doing nothing. And there's another one. Here's a closer look at the plunger. Pop that in there, and then put the spring in place. And then put a little grub screw on top of that. So again, when you put a paper clip through here, it feels like you're activating something, but actually it's doing nothing. Now I'm moving on to putting the final grub screw in. This is the one where you push the paper clip through and activate the locking mechanism below. There's a little through hole inside this grub screw. This will help guide the paper clip through so you hit the bars right in the center. As you can see, I had to assemble this first, because once the locking mechanism is in place, I won't have access to these. I'll now give it a quick test. So using a paper clip, you push through this hole, and you can see it activates the locking mechanism here. It works out both there. That will move these pins out of the way so that the brass pins can carry through these little channels here. And there's the cover. And you can see those little brass pins there. They'll sit inside these channels here. And with that, you use the paper clip and you guide it through this little hole here, right through into the body, which will push the bars out of the way. And you'll be able to rotate those brass pins through those channels and it locks it into place. Again, you push those 3 pins out of the way and it releases the mechanism. And while I'm here, I can put the O-ring into place. Okay, so this is post 1. As you can see, there's a fair few features hidden inside here. Most notably the center seam, which is hidden. So when doing this end, you can see there's nothing hidden in here. Again, a bit of a decoy. But on this side, as you saw during the build, this has a little cavity that will hide tool 3, which is used to solve the plunges in the maze bushes as well as undo's M3 countersink screws. I'll put that tool inside there now, and I'll use the grub screw that I made earlier to retain that in place. And then that cap will hide that. And of course these little caps here will hide the 3 and 4 hole patterns that you use to put the pins into to solve post 3. So I need to split these in half now, and I'll put one half in base 1 and the other half in base 2. And then once the glass part's in place, I can screw these two parts together, which will help lock the two bases together. And this here is probably arguably the most important part of the puzzle. This is what you are solving this whole thing to obtain. And this will sit nicely inside this cavity here with these matching tapers. And this cover here hides the prize and will need to be solved in order to reveal it. I'll rotate this enough so that the holes in this cover will line up with the holes in base 2. I'm going to use these little M6 screws here just to help me to push it into place. And I made this little tool, this little 12mm plug will help me just line these holes up. I'm going to rotate this enough just so I can get this plug in here. And that will mean that all 3 holes should be lined up. And I should be able to get this little plug in, yep, in all of them. And that's so I know it's all lined up nicely. I'll put the O-ring in now. And while we're here, I'm going to put this little brass cover in, which I made earlier. That'll just make everything look a little bit nicer. Okay, so now I'm going to put the glass part into place. Make sure it's seated nicely on the O-rings. And I'm going to put the second half of post 1 through base 2. And I'm going to put base 1 on top of that now. And then make these 2 parts of post 1 mate together. And screw these together, which makes that seam disappear. And I can use those 2 pins I made earlier to put in here and just give it a nice little tighten down so it doesn't come undone easily. That's it, so you have to use these parts to undo it. And these 2 parts will live on these magnets here. Okay, so now we're moving on to post 2. On the ends here are the M3 holes, and in the center here we'll have the M8 male and female, and then 2 M6 grub screws in the center. And these center grub screws will hide the pins inside. So inside here we've got 4 pins, 2 of which will actually solve the puzzle, and 2 are decoy pins. And this other side here, I'll have 8 pins stored inside. And out of these 8 pins, only 2 will solve it, and the other 6 are decoys. So during the solve, if you've separated these, you'll have 4 good ones and 8 decoy ones. So there's 2 good pins going in and 2 decoy pins going in. With them in place, I'll now put the grub screw in to keep them hidden away. And with these 8 decoy pins, they're just basically to waste your time. They just don't work. They either half fit in the holes or they don't fit in the holes at all. And the puzzle element here is to sift through these 12 pins to try and determine which of the 4 are good and which of the 8 decoy. And then hide them, lock them in place with this grub screw here. With those pins now stashed away, I'm going to close it up and I'm going to put it in its place in the puzzle. Obviously, before I can do that, I need to put the maze bushes and the bush assemblies together. So here's one. Here's the little maze bush. And then I've got this little plunger here that goes through the maze. And like I said before, it sits inside there and you have to route this little pin through there to be able to get this plunger out, to be able to access that M3 countersink screw. Right, so I'm going to put that bush in there. I'm going to put the post 2 in there and the M3 countersink screw in there, And I'm going to help screw that into place. Once that's put in, I'm going to flip it over and do the same again. Get base 1's maze bush in there. Put the M3 countersink screw in there, and then screw that into place. And then that now should fix post 2 into place. Like I said, it's got to be very tight, because if it starts spinning, it's going to be quite difficult to undo the maze bush without it spinning around with the plunger. Now I've put a little spot on the end of this plunger here to show which side the pin's on, so once you see there's a maze there, it might help you figure out which side the pin is on to move around. Then you're going to push the plunger in, work its way around to the start of the maze, and that's going to stay there. Now you can't access that M3 countersink screw without getting that out now. And again, do the same to the other side. Put the plunger in, same as got a little dimple here to help you see where the pin is. And then you're going to work it around, put it to the start of the maze. And again, now you can't reach the screw until you solve that. So here's post 3. And again, the middle part of this is a solid bar, so I need to remove this left-handed thread cap here. And do the same with the other side. Again, left-hand thread as well on this one. And I put post 3 into place. And then I'm going to put the cap in the end, and then obviously turn it anti-clockwise to help it screw into place. And do the same on the other side. Screw anti-clockwise to put it into place. And I'll just put some little pins that I've got to help finish it off, because those pins that activate are actually hidden inside post 2 right now. And do the same again, lock that down. And that's that. Now I'm going to use this tool here, which is tool 2, to drive these little M5 grub screws that I made earlier, and these will help retain base 2's cover on. So what I'm going to do is put them into place first. And screw it right in so it doesn't foul on the outside there. And then put the next one in. Again, these will sit right inside so that base 2 can slide over the top of these. And then these grub screws will be rotated anti-clockwise to lock base 2 cover into base 2. Right, so while we're here, I'm going to put the little pins that are used to open up post 1 into place on those magnets. And that's basically base 2 assembled now. So now I need to put the base 2 cover on. And I need to line it up with those little grub screws. And then I'm going to use this little tool here to undo the grub screws so that they lock the base 2 cover into place. And that's locked in now, that's not going to go anywhere. Now we're going to turn the puzzle over and stash this tool where it belongs, on these 2 magnets here. And this is how base 1 will look once you remove the base 1 cover. Okay, this is the base 1 cover with the 3 pins that need to fall inside these slots here. So now I'm going to line up these 2 little dots on the outside. I'm going to take this paper clip here, push it through this little channel, which should in turn push those 4mm silver steel bars out the way so I can rotate the cover into place. And that's it, that's the puzzle assembled. Now I'll move on to assembling the turntable I've made. These are in 2 pieces you saw earlier. I'm just going to put these ball bearings in the race here. And then move them around, make sure they're spread out nicely. Put the second part on. And that's it, that's the whole puzzle assembled. It's been a real pleasure to make, mainly because it's something I've designed from scratch and has really not only tested my machining skills, but also my design skills. The one big lesson I'll take away from this is I think I need to delve into learning some kind of CAD software like Fusion 360 or Mastercam, as it will help me design probably more interesting things and also help me bug and test designs before I actually go and make them, which will save a bit of time and materials if they don't work. And as you saw, I did run into a couple of ideas that didn't actually end up working, which probably could have been highlighted if I tested them in a CAD software first. I do have a few more ideas for some sequential discovery puzzles, so this might not be my last one that I'll make. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it's been so long since my last one. I'm going to get started on the next project, which actually is quite less involved, so I should have the next video out fairly quicker than this one. If you want to keep up with my projects, maybe consider subscribing and you won't miss out on the next one. And please enjoy the last bit of footage of this project, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.